This episode is brought to you by BigMooseCoffeeCompany.co.
Pals, greetings and welcome once again to an episode of Everything Endurance. It is, as always, a genuine pleasure to have you here with us. I hope everyone's doing well and you've all had a good last couple of weeks since the last episode. For anyone who is listening to this in the distant, far-flung future, welcome to the second week of lockdown version 2.0 here in the UK. I hope everyone's keeping happy, keeping sane, getting some miles run or miles walked, whatever it is you can do to keep yourself moving and motivated. Things have been busy here at Beyond the Ultimate. The Scottish race is flying now with the Highland Ultra is going to be next April, and most of the early bird places for that have gone already. That was really encouraging. We figured that you guys were going to be as eager to get out there and get some adventuring done again as we are. And it turns out we're absolutely correct. You guys are impatient for a little adventure. So that's us really looking forward to spending some time in the West Highlands next year. And yeah, we have for you today another slice of inspiration and epic achievement. We've got a runner today who you will know well, not least because they've appeared on this podcast a couple of times previously. And of course, they've appeared on the podcast a couple of times previously. This is a runner who just keeps knocking off big records. And what I think we focus on in this episode, a bit more than the sort of nitty gritty and ins and outs of this runner's latest record, is the fact that they've managed to pull a sort of really high achieving keynote running season out of a year where races were cancelled right, left and centre, and there were a lot of reasons to be feeling a bit pessimistic about life out there. So this is someone that seems to have turned what could have been a very bleak 12 months into something really quite spectacular. And that runner has just grabbed themselves their third FKT of the year by doing the South Wales Traverse. You will realise now, of course, that the person we're going to be speaking to today is none other than the delightful Damian Hall. But, and I know that will have thrown you a little bit because usually I say the name and then they're just there. We've also got a little bonus feature at the end of this episode. Damian Hall and John Kelly obviously both went for Pennine Way FKTs this year and both got them. John Kelly first. Damian Hall holds the current record. And there is a film about their exploits running up and down the Pennine Way coming out soon called Totally FKT. That was made by a team called Summit Fever. And anyone who has any familiarity with the Spine race or some of Damian Hall's previous exploits will know a bit about these guys already. They are an incredible pair of adventure videographers who I've had the pleasure of working with on a number of occasions, and we're just going to do a little featurette at the end where we get them to talk through this fantastic new film that's coming out that you're all going to be able to watch soon. So hang on in there after Damian's interview for that, and without further ado, let's start talking to some guests, shall we? Welcome once again to Damian Hall. Damian, how are you doing?
Hi Will, I'm pretty good, thanks. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm genuinely very well. It's good to talk to you yet again. I thought I was going to have to, really. I saw your sort of most recent FKT come in. It barely feels like news anymore, you know. But then I looked away at it and I just thought, well, we've spoken to John Kelly 3 times this year, and it seems a bit bad to not call Damian again. So here we are. Well done for grabbing a third FKT this year. Is that right?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I was beginning to wonder whose side you guys were on. Yeah, I was feeling a tiny bit betrayed. Not that there's a real rivalry. Of course, we're friends, me and John. I think. But
no, it's just for camera mostly.
But yeah, that's sort of polite way of saying you're really desperate for content, right? Desperate for interviewees. But I'm always available. You know me.
Absolutely. Well, as I said when I first asked you about this, mate, we are below the bottom of the barrel here.
Well, you flatter me, yeah. Yeah.
Well, but this aside, genuine congratulations. You've managed to turn 2020, which could have been an absolute horror of a year and has been in a lot of other ways. You've managed to turn it into something of a sort of flagship year as a runner. That's 3 FKTs in the season for you now. Is it feeling like you've pulled a good year out of this?
Yes, I guess is the short answer. Do you want me to? You probably want me to expand. Yes, it feels very satisfying, if I'm honest, in terms of what the year could have been, and I suppose what it ended up for a lot of people in a sort of a year without races. Although hopefully a lot of people realise that wasn't such a bad thing. Sometimes that's lots of uninterrupted training that could be really good. That could really benefit people next year. I mean, when you race, it does bash you up, and obviously you need some weeks to recover and so on. But I think what I've learned actually from some of my clients is that like a lot of them miss the social, I suppose the get together element of a race, which I guess luckily on definitely my Pennine Way run, that was very social. There were a lot of people very kindly coming out to help. So I got that sort of social fix from it then. I was always going to do the early FKT, which was February, a winter Paddy Buckley round. That was always in the plan. And then I was going to, switch to doing some races. And then when it became clear there might not be any, or at least my main summer races were getting cancelled, the Pennine Way FKT was sort of always on the back burner, and one that I wanted to do for a long time, and that sort of slotted in. That seemed a logical choice. And then when I finished that, I just felt like I seemed to recover okay, and I just felt I could do one more thing this year. The South Wales Traverse, there is a bit of history with it. I did do it about 5 or 6 years ago, when I was just sort of getting into the sport, really. I didn't do it very well. There's a 24-hour deadline, and I finished within 20 minutes of that deadline, so it took me over 23 hours.
That's a hell of a lot of a difference in 5 years, isn't it? 9 hours off your PB.
Yeah, and we could go more into that if you like. But the other thing was, but when I did that previously, I also missed 2 of the summits. I've got to be open about that. I wasn't fully aware of that straight away, and it's not at the time. You didn't sort of register it anywhere. You can now, but you didn't at the time. So I didn't kind of register it officially, but I must admit I did do a humble brag on Facebook at the time. Do you remember Facebook? That was a thing back then.
It's been a while, but yeah.
I did publicly to friends kind of say, hey, I've done the Traverse. And then a week or two later, I was writing it up as a magazine story, looking at my GPX file and thinking, actually, I didn't get to the right point there. Which was a bit frustrating.
Damn. So what became of the story? Did you sort of have to fess up there, I guess?
Well, did I? No, I don't think I did. I don't know if I did, if I'm honest. There was so a lot of my early races were always magazine stories as well, because primarily I was a journalist. And I was actually told by a magazine editor who I did most of my stories for, they have to be a success. Because, the magazine is all about inspiring stories, getting out there, having a successful outcome, and that can be a bit relative, what is success, but I suppose not fully completing it would not have been a success. So I did use artistic license in that story. I didn't say I missed 2 summits. I may have written something, knowing me, like I can't remember, I was tired and it was dark and I can't remember tagging the summit, or, something a bit ambiguous, possibly. Hopefully I did. Maybe I'll go and reread that when I get off the line and find out I'm deceiving myself. But yes, I didn't do it properly. I maybe wasn't totally honest about it, but it wasn't like it was not, it wasn't a record or anywhere near to a record.
No, you're not going to have Guinness knocking on your door after this podcast gets out. I'm sure this isn't a matter for the police. Just a little fake news.
But yeah, it was a tiny bit dishonest. But at that time, I mean, I wasn't, no one was taking much interest in my running. I wasn't winning races or setting records. But yes, slightly dishonest. But it was a great adventure, and I always kind of thought, I'd like to come back and do that properly sometime. And then I suppose for those who don't know, the South Wales Traverse is kind of one side of the Brecon Beacons to the other, 73 miles and 31 tops, or 29 if I do it. And yeah, I guess I'd always thought, well, it'd be nice to come back and do it properly. So not long after the Pennine Way, I was thinking, yeah, I could do one more thing this year. Maybe that's one to do partly because I already knew some bits of it quite well, and then it's not too far from home. But actually, the record on it was very good. My friend Dan Doherty has the record, and before that was a Mark Hartel record, who's a fell running legend. So he's it's a record of pedigree. And Dan, for those who don't know him, he should be much better known. So he's been Welsh fell running champion, so he's very good at short stuff, but he's also been 5th at Tour de Gionne. So He's very good at long stuff too. So he's like this annoyingly good athlete. He can do the short stuff and the long stuff. He lives in Merthyr Tydfil on the edge of the Brecon Beacons, so he trains there all the time. And I've trained with him quite a lot, and he's better than me at the ups and the downs and the flats. For a long time, I didn't even think about going for his record until I really studied his route. And then navigation isn't a strong point, as probably already been highlighted. But
stronger now than 5 years ago, I'd assume.
I hope so. Yes, I hope so. But I did look at his route, and I did think there were. Well, he confessed that he'd lost maybe 20 minutes in some woods at one point. But I did see 2 or 3 other places where I thought there might be a slightly quicker line, as I believe fell runners call it. So I did go out there and recce it quite carefully, sometimes kind of running one route, going back, running the other route. I've never really taken that much interest in sort of, lines and the exact route, but I honestly thought the only way to beat him would be a slightly superior route. And that's what happened, I suppose.
Well, that's very interesting. I think it's easy to look at these things from the outside and assume that it's a question of, having stronger legs than the person who went along that trail before you. But actually, this one, it's been, your success has been related to your sort of tactics before you even laced your shoes up to an extent.
I genuinely think so, yes, because, I know Dan well, and he's an incredible athlete, and I just don't think I could, if we had a flat out race together, he would beat me on nearly every distance. So that was, I suppose my analysis was, how could I beat him? Okay, there might be a chance if I, target this aspect of it. I saw that as my only hope. Whereas a lot of the time, well, I suppose, say the Pennine Way, there's not really there's one route to take. You don't have an option. I guess on the Paddy Buckley round, there are 2 or 3 moments where you get a bit of choice, but people are starting to know the Paddy Buckley a lot better. Like over 150 people have completed it. So the knowledge is probably more widely available of what the better routes are. Whereas the South Wales Traverse, I did check recently, and it was still less than 50 people have ever completed it that we know of. So it's not as widely known. In fact, there is some confusion on exactly where the start point is and exactly what wall you should finish at. But I was very careful to communicate with Martin Stone and some other fell runners about exactly where they thought those points should be. So it is, obviously a lesser known challenge, but round here we see it as, well, we kind of see it as the fourth big fell running challenge, but I appreciate elsewhere in the country that may be disputed. But,
they might have a different argument about that, but still, I guess 72 miles. What was it, about 18,000 feet of climbing, which is, a bit more than half an Everest. This is a big trail that you've managed to run along here, but compared to the Pennine Way, a mere morsel next to that feast.
Well,
was it a different training experience after you came off the Pennine Way before going at this? Like your approach must be different over a sort of shorter distance like this. It's almost a sprint for you, Damian.
Yes, it kind of is, but I'm not much of a sprinter. So the big difference was the way I calculated the Pennine Way was that as long as I traveled for just over 4 miles an hour the whole time, I could break the record. And 4 miles an hour, almost every runner would think that was achievable, probably to them on certain terrains anyway. So on the Pennine Way, you don't really have to travel that fast. You just have to keep going and going and going. Whereas on this one, I had to travel over 5 miles an hour. And there's a lot more vert in that, it's a lot more condensed. So I had to travel quite a lot faster, if I'm honest. And that isn't my strength really. So I did see it as a bit of a sprint. So training had to be, after the Pennine Way, I had plenty of endurance, banked. It was much more about, working on speed, working on going uphill quickly. It was a very different experience. I mean, and also just the feeling when I did it, like on the Pennine Way, first 24 hours were fairly blissful, and I'd got like 3 hours up on target, and I was like, this is the life. This is, I don't think I ever thought this is easy, but like, this is all going lovely. This is, perfect. This is exactly what I hoped for. On the South Wales Traverse, it was almost entirely the opposite feeling most of the time. I was nearly always within kind of 5 minutes of the record, or at least my schedule, 5 minutes either way. And it would so often be 2 or 3 minutes up, 2 or 3 minutes down, 2 or 3 minutes up, 2 or 3 minutes down. And that really plays with your mind over time. And I'm quite disappointed with how kind of pessimistic I got for a while, of thinking I'm working hard and I'm still behind. So it was, a lot more stressful, if I'm honest, in terms of just no time to relax. Just had to keep, putting in an honest, shift, I suppose, all the time. I mean, it was still enjoyable. I had, some good friends helping me. The weather was fantastic, especially kind of late evening, classic autumnal sort of glow over the Black Mountains as I was running along there, which was just lovely.
You do paint a picture, Damian. That's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, it was really, really special, actually. And also my crew, I was quite relaxed about where they might meet me in terms of pacing me. I kind of thought any pacing is a bonus. And they often surprised me towards the end as well, and would just turn up and run with me to give me a boost. And that does give you like a nice, emotional boost, that they kind of, they still care about me. They haven't gone off me totally, quite yet. And I should mention Dan Summers, who we always planned that he would meet me for the final section, including this key bit in the woods where Dan Doherty had got lost. And Dan had kindly gone out beforehand and recce'd it. I had as well. It seemed really absolutely crucial to me to get this line down into the woods and back up the other side right. Dan had recce'd it too, and then he joined me and really kept me honest all the way along there. But even with about an hour to go, Dan has since told me was the first time he thought, actually, we might not do this. So it was that close.
Wow, yeah. I mean, with an hour to go over 14 hours, we're talking relatively home stretch here, and it was still very much in question at that point.
Yeah, because, well, I guess I was tired and grumpy, and I wasn't moving brilliantly, and I was still a few minutes behind the splits, behind my schedule. And he was really good. He knew the pace we had to go. He knew the route. He was keeping things positive. But afterwards, there was a moment where he said, this is really tight now. And we basically had to sort of cut 2 minutes off the last kind of 3 splits on my schedule. And we pretty much did. But for me, it was only, it's dark by the time we finished. It was only when we got to the very top of the plateau to finally come down to Llanthony Abbey, where it finishes. That was the first time for a while I thought, we could do this, because I think we had 20 minutes to get down. Obviously in the dark you can't really see how far it is, but and interestingly, I had a few of my crew and supporters waiting down there, and they said they felt exactly the opposite when they saw my head torch. They thought, too late. But we bombed down that hill, and we both went flying at one point, got very muddy, which was good fun. And we did it with, was it exactly 5 minutes, I think, or very close to 5 minutes?
Very, very close.
So, it was quite exciting. It was exciting for us. And I believe there was a tracker black spot, apparently. So those who were following online, it didn't show whether I'd made it in time or not, which must have, for my mum at least, who is possibly the only one watching, she was kept in suspense. And then we didn't have good reception down the bottom, so we couldn't really tell anyone for a bit. But pretty exciting. Good adventure.
It's just building the suspense, right? It's just getting a little more anticipation into the mix. You are a journalist, after all.
Yes. I mean, it'd be boring if I'd broken it easily, wouldn't it? I mean, you want to hear me suffer and only just do it, surely.
Oh, yeah, ideally. I mean, it makes the podcast a lot more interesting. But there you go. You have done that for us. It sounds like you were sort of held against the wheel for most of this 14 hours. So where do you look? Where do you dig when things are just not going your way on a long run? And this is a long time for things to be not necessarily going your way.
Well, Will, my motivation is always, will I be able to get back on the Beyond the Ultimate podcast? If I don't run well, they might not want me back on. We've
only barely called you on this one, and you broke it.
If I run well, that's my ultimate reward. I've got quite a few motivational buttons to press now. I mean, the cheesy, obvious one is I suppose, kids and wanting to, I suppose, impress them or for them to feel proud of me one day. They're not at the moment. Rightly so. Yeah, they're not very interested, really.
What will you have to run to get their attention?
Well, exactly. Yeah. Because they don't think 100 miles is a long way now. Because I sort of say, they know UTMB is 100 miles. So if I say I'm running 73 miles, they're like, yeah,
all right.
And so yeah, I press that kind of emotional button in my head of like, set a good example for your kids, make them proud of you. I do go to those areas. I don't mind admitting. And then secondarily, it's often the people who are helping you out there on the ground. And I didn't have loads of people, but I had my good friends Mark and Tim crewing me. Dan had obviously turned up to pace me. Kerry came along from around here as well. It's a sort of hour and a half drive. She turned out to help me. I made a friend called Ruth out in the Black Mountains who was helping. And then, Dan and Lee Proctor from Innovate had come all the way down from the Lake District to cover it a bit on social media. But, I consider him a friend too. And he paced me on sections too. So that's the next place you go. You think, how many is that? I don't know, 6, 7, 8 people have given up their day, given up several days to come and help. So you can't just slack off when you don't feel like it. You've got to put in an honest effort. And then I suppose definitely online live tracking does help me, because definitely on the winter paddy, I don't know if I said it when we spoke about that, but there was definitely a moment where I was like, I'm about done. There's a pub down there. It'd be nicer to be in that pub. And then I think, no one would really know. I could just sack it off. And then you think, live tracking, isn't there? And that does.
By the time you got signal, there'd already be Facebook groups full of people talking about the fact that your dot had stopped flashing. Yeah. Well,
I never want to overemphasize the level of interest, but or take it for granted. But yeah, if there's live tracking, especially in the winter when there's not much else to do necessarily for ultra runners. Usually a live tracker can be pretty addictive.
Speaking of times in life where there isn't an awful lot to do, Damian, we're very much living through one of those at the moment. Dot watching these FKTs has become quite a big part of my life. Yes, and I'm no different. I love watching them. So it does keep you honest as well, because you kind of think,
so some other, I guess people you don't necessarily know are watching, and you've got sort of that spurs you on a bit. So that's at least 3 layers. And maybe that's roughly as far as it goes, but I suppose with the Pennine Way, I guess I tried to bring in a load of annoying climate stuff as well, which definitely helps me. I think that just made the whole thing a bigger thing for me. Like, I guess I was trying to, I don't know, live by some values and so on. And I did do the same out in the Brecon Beacons, but obviously it's not as in fact I only picked up one bit of rubbish. I only thought only found one bit of rubbish, which was a bit disappointing, really.
Although good that people weren't leaving it out there for you. We're happy about that.
Well, maybe that was the difference. You see, on the Pennine Way, I always had this thing in my mind that maybe John Kelly was scattering. He was there 8 days before me. Maybe he was scattering a bit behind him. I don't know this.
We're not. That's not an accusation directly, but it's an idea. And he hadn't run the South Wales Traverse, and there's no rubbish on it. And now I'm not saying he did, but there is a pattern forming here, though, isn't there?
Yeah.
So we're waiting to hear from your people, John. Get in touch.
And I'm lawyering. He may be lawyering up. I'll be lawyering up on that. Yeah.
Okay, so there were some tough moments while you were going through this 14 hours of South Wales Traverse. What about high points? What do you... And I often wonder about this. If you are in the middle of this sort of 14 hours of quite intensive activity and you're very focused on your route and focused on how your body's feeling and your nutrition, there's quite a lot to deal with, right? It's quite a lot to think about. Do you manage to take the time to look around and drink in where you are?
Yes. Yeah, no, I'm really confident. I'm confident I do. Like, I already mentioned the sort of lovely evening light up on the Black Mountains. And the morning, it was a bit cloudy and blowy early on, but yeah, the sort of sun started piercing through the clouds, which was nice. And it was generally a sunny day. And then the scenery was, it was fantastic actually. And then it can often be moments with other people, shared with other people. Like I say, my sort of paces would surprise me sometimes. And, that just fills you with, a bit of gratitude and maybe they're coming usually with some good humor until they see how grumpy I am anyway. So you get those moments with other people and say, like, I didn't know, for example, if Kerry was going to turn up and chip in and help. And I was hoping Dan Summers would be there at the end, but like it was still a nice boost to see him, like, because you're a bit nervous about will he be there. And then quite a few people at the finish as well. And there was, two guys turned up, three people actually, I think, turned up randomly. Oh, I didn't know them at all. One guy, he was a fireman, a local fireman. I'm really sorry I've forgotten his name. So if you're listening, thank you very much for turning up. It gave me a big boost. But he just sort of said, I've just come down from work early because I knew you'd be running through here. And I just wanted to say hello. And that's really touching. And then he was at the finish line as well. What's his name? I've written it down somewhere. But thank you, that guy. And there were two or three other people who did that, were waiting around to see me, which is, it's just really lovely. And it does give you a boost. One guy at the top of the top of the big climb up to the Black Mountains, he'd been waiting up there a little while, just to get a bit of footage and say hello. So that, that's hugely rewarding when people do that. Feel really, really grateful. So yeah, no, you do take it in. And I think because you're more, how do you say this, like more kind of emotionally entangled with the landscapes almost, because there's some pressure and some stress, although those words seem a bit too dramatic, but there is more emotions going on. It means a change in weather or a change of personnel or something. I think it gives you bigger, the highs are higher and the lows are lower than if it was just a training run or just a walk.
Yeah.
So I think you almost make more memories and you have more feelings on those sorts of things. If that doesn't sound too much like wishy-washy nonsense, but
no, it sounded lovely.
I've said it now.
It's out there. It's recorded. Yeah. I tell you what I noticed there, and what I noticed when I ask anybody on the podcast about that is when I ask for highlights and moments that really stick in the memory, it's almost always to do with people. With the people that you met along the way. Now, I guess we alluded to that earlier when we were saying that, a big part of what people have missed with the races being off the calendar this year is the camaraderie, is the community around these races behind the scenes. It's good that you've managed to find that through these FKTs, and other people seem to be as well. Glad that fireman came out to see you.
Thank you, fireman. Yes. See, I've realised I feel lucky because I've had these three experiences, these three, record attempts. I don't really think I've missed races exactly, but I've missed the social aspect. So because I got the social aspect in these two, I didn't on the Paddy Buckley run. That gave me almost the same feeling as a race. And an FKT, I think, again, I'm looking into this a bit. This book I'm writing, like, what's the difference between a FKT or just a solo challenge? Sorry, it doesn't need to be solo, but a challenge you do outside of a race scenario. What's the difference? What do you get from that you don't get from a race? So I'm quite interested in that, and I'd be keen to hear other people's thoughts actually. And sometimes, so I don't feel like I've missed race. I'm definitely keen to do some races next year, but I'm not as keen as I was. I don't miss them as much because these personal projects can be more rewarding. I suppose. I think for me.
Well, over the course of the year, then there's been 3 FKTs for you. Which one really sticks out for you? What's been your highlight of the year?
I suppose it has to be the Pennine Way. Really, that does seem like it's sort of a holy grail for me. Really,
That's felt like it's been coming for a long time. You literally wrote the book on the Pennine Way. You know, the first time I set foot on the Pennine Way working on the spine race, you were there. I feel like you're almost synonymous with it.
Yeah, so it had that much more meaning for me, and there's a lot more history, and it, to me, it is one of the big ones in Britain, up there with. Well, I'll let other people decide this really, but to me, it's in the top kind of 3 to 5, running records, excluding all that nonsense on roads and tracks, which doesn't interest me a great deal. Mm-hmm. But yeah, whereas the other 2 records, I'm really chuffed with, but probably won't last all that long, and aren't quite up there in the upper canon. But the Pennine Way, long time coming, a lot of history. It's got to be that one, really, I think.
Big record as well. You alluded there to the fact that there's a good chance that record will stand for a while.
Well, I say that. I believe, I'm not sure how committed he is, but there's this pesky American dude. It's rumoured, I don't know for sure, but he has hinted he may return. So I don't know how long it'll last. But
can he leave it for a while? Because I'm not having him on the podcast again this year. It's getting ridiculous now. He's on speed dial in my Zoom account.
I'll have a word. Yeah, I mean, I'm all for putting him off too, Will. So maybe we can work on him, distract him with Tunnocks bars and other snacks, because he is a bit of a sucker for sugary snacks. Maybe we can lay a trail of them elsewhere in the country.
Just lead him off into another corner.
Yes.
But what about the South Wales Traverse record that you've just done? That was obviously a very stout record that you took on yourself. That looks to me like one that it's going to take a real effort for somebody to shave any more time off.
I'm very happy with the route choice, but there's at least one person I know who could definitely break it, and that is Dan Doherty, whose record I broke. And he has said to me he will go for it next year. So I do expect him to beat it, because he lost kind of 20, 25, even 30 minutes down to route choices, I think. So he could run it better than me, and I wouldn't do much better than I did the other week. So yeah, I do sort of think he will go, and he sort of deserves it. And there's actually a trophy for this one. What's amazing?
Really?
There's actually a trophy. And he said, I'll send it to you. And I think I kind of said, well, you might as well hold on to it for now, because I'll just be sending it back in the spring. But we'll see. I haven't seen him for a while, ever since I broke his record, actually. But no, because of lockdown, I should clarify. But yeah, I hope to catch up with him. But he could very, very comfortably beat the time I set, I think. But watch and see, I suppose.
So, to you personally, as a runner, the FKTs, do you feel like you have an ownership on them after you've set them? And I'm asking this knowing that your Southwest Coast Path record obviously went a little while ago, and I spoke to Christian Morgan on the podcast. Does it rankle a little when that happens? Do you want it back?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Will.
No worries, that's what I'm here for.
I thought we were sticking with that. I'm the best runner, right? And now we just talk about my successes. Yes,
it's all a rich tapestry, Damian. Yeah.
I've had a good year in that I've broken 3 records of FKTs, but I've lost 2 actually. So it hasn't all been going my way.
I missed one.
The overall Paddy Buckley round was broken in the summer.
Of course it was.
Now I suppose I can't help but be a little bit. My ego wants to be a little bit kind of defensive about both of them, and state reasons why those records weren't my best effort. But really, yeah, no one I think wants to see their record beaten. I think Mike Hartley was different. He'd had that record for 31 years, and I did phone him up and chat to him before the Pennine Way runs, and he did genuinely say, and both Matt and Ellie, who had interviewed him before, said he's ready for someone to take it, 31 years, and he did say that to me on the phone, he's ready to hand it over, he doesn't mind, kind of thing. So maybe when you've had it for a long time, and actually it's quite funny when we're standing by the Nag's Head in Edale at the end of the Pennine Way. John pointed out that Mike had the record for having the record for the longest time, and John had the record for having the record for the least longest time. for the Pennine
Plenty
Way.
of records to go around then.
And I'm probably sounding like a scratch record. With where were we? Yeah, I didn't. And with the Southwest Coast part, because it's like 10 to 11 days, it's going on for a long time. So you're really getting used to the idea of someone's beating you. It was really interesting to watch, and I like Christian, and he phoned me up beforehand. I've never met him, but he phoned me up beforehand, and we had a nice chat. And I was messaging him during the attempt. Most of it was supportive, trying to put him off sometimes. No, turn left, definitely turn left. And yeah, it's curious watching someone else. I think John said something like, when he watched me on the Pennine Way, it was a bit like your friend going off with your ex-girlfriend, kind of like, you wish them well, but something about it isn't quite what you want or doesn't feel quite right.
I had wondered if that was the case. This is good. We've got there. This is what I was driving at. That
Okay.
This community of runners, everyone I've spoken to about their FKTs, they have at least had some contact with the person who had the record before as part of their preparation for it. There's relationships. I haven't heard anyone at all who's been like, no, I didn't talk to them. Like no one's been abrupt or abrasive about each other, but I figure there must be a little bit in the back of your head that's like, oh, that was mine. You can't just have that.
There is.
I mean, you worked hard for that.
Yeah, there is. I won't pretend I wasn't celebrating when Christian, I wasn't hitting the bottle, but I wasn't. And with that one, as I say, you got a fair bit of time to get used to it because you're kind of like, oh yeah, he's just about ahead. But it was quite close. 3 hours, and he didn't sleep on that last night to sort of make that 3 hours. So even going to bed on the final night, like it was kind of neck and neck. He was a little bit ahead. So full credit to him. He did it. I guess my run was always, and here's the defensive ego bit. My run was always a bit compromised. I set off with someone else, and they developed, a knee problem got worse, and we had a couple of days where we sort of did less mileage than we had planned. So I always knew if someone could sort of stick roughly to what I was doing, and then do okay on those 2 days, that they would have a good chance. And that's what Christian did. He really studied what I'd done, and that was quite obvious. But it was still, it would have been hard work for him as it was for me. But yeah, with that one, I haven't yet had this feeling of I want it back because it's 10 or 11
Anticipating
days.
my next question here,
it's a long
are you going to go back for it?
It's a long time. So I don't feel a burning urge, if I'm honest. And maybe because I had that one for 4 years, that's an okay amount of time. Now with some of the other records, and I do anticipate possibly losing, a winter Paddy Buckley record over this winter. I wouldn't be stunned if someone went and took that, because I know it's not a great record necessarily. And winter's so complicated because conditions can be so different, of course. And it's not a stellar time. And I only beat the previous record by a handful of minutes. So I could see myself losing, the South Wales one and the winter Paddy one. I could see myself losing both of them by early spring.
Well, I mean, let's hope that's not the case. But
Well, you could get me on the podcast and I could just sob
gently for 45 minutes.
Yeah, that'd be good listening, wouldn't it? So I don't love it. It's quite a new experience. But I suppose hopefully it just fires you up to either go back and try and get the record back or to get some more somewhere else. But it's a nice problem to have, I guess not everyone can say they have lost a record. So I'm not going to, I'm not begging people to feel sorry for me.
Let's focus on what you had, Damian. Absolutely. Also, do you have an IMDb set up yet? I mean, you're going to be in another film that's coming up, right? We've got Totally FKT, and I really wanted to pronounce that as it scans as you look at it, but I don't want to have to put a rating on this on iTunes, so we're going to go with Totally FKT.
Yeah, well, I feel very fortunate that Matt and Ellie from Summit Fever Media, who you know well from working on The Spine, and I know well, I met them on The Spine as well. They have repeatedly considered me worth sticking in front of the camera. I think that's because I often tempt them with looking like I'm about to cry, and Matt gets excited because it's like, yes, a grown man crying. That's what we need. And then I usually manage to pull back at the last minute and no tears. which frustrates him. So, yeah, they've been very kind to me in that. And also, every time they filmed me, I think things have gone well. They were there at the Highland Fling, where I had a breakthrough race and spine race. They made Underdog, and then they're obviously making this film about running the Pennine Way, which is equally about John, of course.
Yes.
I wanted them to call it, to follow up Underdog. I wanted them to call it Underbog, but they've got a proper sense of humour, so they went for something better. But yeah, very grateful for them for sticking me in the films. I think it does keep you honest. Like I say, with the tracker, knowing people are watching live, if you think, right, I quite want to quit, or I want to walk for a bit, or I'm a bit fed up and I want to sit down and whinge, but there's suddenly a camera there. Usually, I would say on the Pennine Way, it went past that stage actually, and I just didn't care or even notice. But usually, it probably makes you up your game a bit and go, come on, some people might watch this. Don't be so pathetic, I suppose. But
I've done photography and videography at races all around the world now, and it doesn't matter how knackered anybody is, they'll always move at least 10% faster if they think I've got my camera turned on. Definitely.
Well, yeah.
I mean, you have an advantage, really, as soon as somebody starts filming. It seems to be that if I press the shutter button, everyone around you suddenly starts running faster.
Well, there's definitely that thing that I do, what I think a lot of people do, whereas you're walking an uphill, there's a cameraman ahead, so you start jogging the uphill. I do that, and it helps. You've gone a bit quicker, and it shows you could have gone quicker as well. So, playing up for the cameras is a thing.
You've got enough on your plate, surely, while you're doing one of these big challenges. Is it disruptive at all to have somebody along making a sort of documentary alongside it while you're doing these things? I say that having worked with Matt and Ellie quite extensively and knowing full well that they are very good at not horribly disrupting the activity that they're filming. That's very much the core of what they're doing. But right? There are these people buzzing around you with cameras at any given moment. Is it an extra consideration for you? Does it make it any harder, or are you able to switch off now? Is it Big Brother style?
Yeah, the honest answer is I don't know. But I'm very used to having them around when I'm, being grumpy and miserable and tired, and they're good friends. In fact, Matt is the guide father to my son. We're that good friends. So I'm just very used to having them around. So I don't really notice that they're filming, if I'm honest. I guess just occasionally, maybe actually it's often the day before the big challenge when they want to film you. And you're a bit stressed maybe with sorting your kit out for the 73rd time, or that sort of thing. That's sometimes where you don't necessarily, you're not as, what's the word? I don't want to sound ungrateful, but actually what I did before the Pennine Way was I gave myself an extra day in Kirkyethom to do stuff like that, so that it wasn't going to be a mad rush, and it wasn't going to be a last few hours. I needed to try and get good sleep the night before, etc. So I actually gave myself extra time to do that sort of stuff. So they interviewed me beforehand. I suppose that's the sort of time when it gets a bit where it could get, if you didn't plan it well, could get in the way, I suppose. When we did Underdog at UTMB, all three of us were in the same apartment. Not only that, we didn't even have separate rooms. We were literally pretty much sleeping almost in the same bed. No, let's not go there. But I was on a sort of sofa bed thing. So I was being filmed, brushing my teeth, putting the kettle on, stuff like that. I think if that wasn't them, I would have found it a bit annoying after a while. But because they're my friends, I kind of don't notice it really, which hopefully works out well for them, because I'm not really thinking too much about the fact. But I haven't seen Totally FKT yet, so I have no idea how, what a pathetic individual I come across as. I guess we'll see soon, I suppose. Don't know. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely it will. And look, I realise we're into November now, and probably 3 FKTs is enough for you. But is this the end of your 2020 running season, or have you still got big plans?
No, that's it. That's it for this year. I think it's important to be respectful of I suppose my aging body, and these efforts are big. They are exhausting, and I don't want to make the mistake that I've seen other people make, I suppose, of just cramming in more and more, especially when you feel good. Oh, do another one. Also, I suppose we got the lockdown element as well at the moment, where most FKTs wouldn't be probably within the rules or within the ethics, probably. So I mean, I do love winter running in Britain. I definitely have I'm hoping there's a race in January, which I'm hoping will go ahead, which I hope to take part in.
All fingers crossed for that one.
Yeah. But no more FKTs for now. But next year, I've sort of planned next year, and at the moment it looks like, I suppose, 2 big races and two FKTs, because I like them equally, if not more, I think, than races.
Wonderful. Are you willing to tell us what they are, or shall I find out when I call you onto the podcast next year?
Yeah, I'm not willing to tell you, no.
Fair enough.
No, I think because also they may not happen for this reason or that. So I'd rather wait till they're a lot more likely. And I'm just happy. Yeah, I'm just happier keeping them close to my chest until I'll tell you off air. Yeah,
fair enough. I like that. I like it when that happens. I really am sorry to anyone who is listening here, but I do get a little selfish buzz knowing that I'll find out after I've stopped recording this. Maybe I'll find some way of sneaking the information out in some kind of coded format on my Twitter or something, but otherwise you guys are screwed. It's just between me and Damian. Well, thanks for chatting to us once again, Damian. We are making a habit of this, but I quite like talking to you.
Oh, well, you're very kind. You're fun to talk to, and yeah, I nearly gave away all my secrets there about next year. Anytime you're as desperate for content as this, do drop me a line. Although maybe this chat's gone so boringly and badly that you won't do that. But thank you.
We'll look at the listening figures afterwards. I think that we'll use that as a guide. Okay, then, in a little bit of a change to how we usually do things, we've got an extra little featurette for you here. We've just been talking about Totally FKT, this excellent new film that's going to be coming up soon about John Kelly and Damian Hall's exploits on the Pennine Way, and I thought, you know what? I know the guys that made that. I feel like we should talk to them about it. So here we are. I'm really, really happy to introduce here Matt and Ellie from Summit Fever. Matt and Ellie, how are you doing?
Very good, thanks, Will. How are you?
Well, I'm very well. Thank you very much. It's really good to be talking to you guys in a kind of podcast rather than a worky capacity. It must have been a bloody unusual year for you guys. It's great that you've had this project to focus on. How has it all panned out for you?
It was a bit of a relief to have this project, I think, to get stuck into, because so much work has been cancelled. So that when all the athletes decided to start going for these FKTs, it was amazing. We've got some stories to get stuck into over the year, keep us busy.
Yeah, and I think like Damian had been mentioning to us for years that Pennine Way, and we knew it was coming, but we felt like, you know, he wasn't ready to commit to it yet. But I think John did him a massive favour in pushing him over the edge to actually go and do it. And it was really nice and an unusual situation within FKTs to have two athletes that were not only friends, both going for the same record, originally wanting to do it at the same time, which ended up being a week apart, and yeah, it was a really unique situation in a lot of respects, and so we were totally all over that for some storytelling.
Oh yeah, I mean, what a brilliant set of stories to be able to tell over what could have been a really bleak summer. And I guess for a bit of background for people who don't know a lot about Summit Fever, I was going to have the Spine Daily Video theme tune queued up for this bit, and I really should have done it. Maybe I can play it in the background when this goes out. But yeah, if you've seen daily videos from the Spine race while it's going on over the last few years, and obviously a number of other races internationally now, then you'll have seen Summit Fever's work. And I don't think there could have been a pair of filmmakers who knew as much about the Pennine Way from the amount of time you've spent charging around on it. Like, you guys know where to get 4G in a lay-by anywhere on that route, you know, as far as I can tell. So what a brilliant set of circumstances to come together that Damian and John are going to do this thing this year, and there you are, ready to cover every nook and cranny of that trail. What's so special about the Pennine Way?
I guess the Pennine Way.
That's a tricky one.
The Pennine Way is quite an unusual.
It's not stereotypically. It's not your stereotypical, I don't know, alpine trail or rocky. I don't know, rocky dramatic vistas or snowy peaks, but there's something very gritty about it that captures the imagination.
It's an uncut diamond.
Wonderful. You know what? I'm going to give you that. It absolutely is. It's beautiful alongside being boggy and terrible. You know, it's an absolutely gorgeous place that will try and kill you in January while you're doing that race. 100%.
And I think I think from a storytelling point of view, and this probably makes us come across as really mean and horrible, but I think a lot of people underestimate how tough it is.
Absolutely.
I was just going to say, like, it's a very wicked combination of features, really. It's long enough that you can't just get away with it. Like, it's just too long for that to happen.
Can't wing it.
You can't wing it. Then the features along the way, like the bogs and the high moorland and the exposure, you just can't escape from. And the sort of the attrition rates and everything, you're fully exposed, not just from the physical sense, but in every sense, you're fully exposed from the start. There's nowhere to hide. And it's as soon as you take that first step, you're committing to what I think would be, a lot of people would recognise as one of the toughest journeys you could do, certainly in England and into the borders.
You got a perfect backdrop there for an excellent trail running film, which is exactly what you guys have put together by all sounds of it. And I've got to ask, like, I've worked alongside you guys on the Spine before, and there's no sleep. Like, it's not a glamorous thing being a sort of filmmaker or media person behind the scenes on this thing, as obviously wonderful as it is. How was the experience for you filming these guys out on the Pennine Way? I'm not going to claim for a second that you're working quite as hard as they are, but it's logistically got to be pretty difficult, right?
I think
it is hard. I think because and I guess you're in the same situation, Will. You've worked on the Spine for so long that you do know the knowledge of the Pennine Way really helps, because you're pre-armed. You know where the hot spots are. You know where people tend to get into difficulties. You know where things are going to get tough. You know where the weather's at its worst, and you also know where 4G is, which is really important, because if you can't get to those trackers, then you could be chasing your tail around in circles. I
think a lot of it is like planning. So yeah, that comes down to knowing the route, knowing a lot about the athletes, quite frankly. So, before events, we'll like the Spine race, we talk to and engage with the athletes to find out a bit more about them. And when we follow athletes on FKTs, it's good to know a lot about them, because you can judge quite well at what time they're going to be having those highs and lows. And those are the crucial moments in the story. And then when it comes to the actual event itself,
we did have help. We had Steve Ashworth helping us, so we had an extra camera up, which was a big help.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Shout out Steve. Sorry about that.
But
I love the way you're making this sound like you can really kind of start predicting their biorhythms, and I know if we hit them at that particular roadhead at about that time, they're going to be in a terrible mood.
Oh yeah.
For the benefit of anybody drinking in this podcast, not watching it on YouTube, that was Ellie pretending to make a crying face in the background. It's part of the story, though, right? That's what you're there for.
I remember Damian, I think, at one point said to us, "Why you're always here when I feel at my absolute worst, but I like watching that back. You hate it he hates it at the time, but he likes watching it back."
Yeah, but that is where the story is. That's what we're invested in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think like during filming an event or an FKT, you're never, it doesn't matter how many times you've done it, you're never comfortable because you never know. It's the nature of documentary filming, is you never know what's going to happen, and you might have to be ready to be somewhere as quickly as possible at any time. And we just have to be as organized as possible during filming. So for example, like deciding when we're going to sleep or taking it in turns to sleep and making sure that we do sleep enough, because there's no point in being a hero and not sleeping at all, because then you won't be able to do your job properly or drive a car safely. So having that sort of plan in place so we can go, okay, right, I'm going to take half an hour now, or Ellie's going to take an hour, or, you know, Steve was sleeping. So we're in rotation, and and then you don't have to worry so much about organising yourself. You can focus more on what's going on, following the story.
Fantastic. And look, I don't want you to give away too much of what happens in the film, but are there any particular highs and lows we should be looking out for? What are peak moments from either John or Damian's experience that have really stuck with you?
One that I like is the sense of humour, the humorous stories that come out of it, and the people that you meet along the way. One of the great things about setting an FKT on a national trail is, at the same time, there are loads of walkers and loads of people. Like, there's an environment that sort of exists on the trail, and bumping into them, there's some nice meetings on that. Great characters, really good.
And I think the humour. I mean, there's obviously the highs and lows that Damian and John were going through, but it's the humour. I think there's a lot of this in event work as well. Like, you know, there's the humour on the outsky, on the periphery, the people, these teams around the two protagonists who are, you know, often, a lot of the time, they're sleep deprived, they're running for certainly, well, some of them quite a few miles, kind of 50, 60 miles, and the humour and the camaraderie between the support teams, that was the highlight. And then, I'm not going to tell you what happened, but there's a certain particularly dramatic moment in a camper van somewhere.
There's a really dramatic moment in a camper van. It's not a strapline for a Hollywood film, but I do look forward to seeing said camper van moment. Also, don't worry too much about giving away the ending. We do know that John and then Damo both break the FKT.
Oh, what have you done?
I wasn't supposed to tell anyone.
It's a bit like the Titanic, isn't it?
Oh man, I'm going to have to go back and delete at least 2 episodes of my podcast now. I didn't realize I was ruining it for everybody. The film itself, then, how far back does it go? Does the film cover just the period that they're out on the trails, or are you with them during any of the prep and aftermath of this?
So, because we're covering both storylines of John and Damian, we wanted to focus on their experience on the Pennine Way fairly exclusively.
I think
having said that,
squidging. I think I think because there will be a little bit of explanation on who John and Damian are, but we haven't gone into the prep too much, because this is something that I've been wondering about a fair bit when we're editing. But there's so many films already about them as kind of established athletes, that we decided to talk more about the history of the Pennine Way in regards to like Mike Hartley's record, and then going straight into the...
Yeah, well, absolutely. That's a 31-year-old record. That's absolutely staggering. I'm very glad to hear that it's gonna, take the story right back to that place as well.
Sorry, I hope I didn't come across as bossy. I'm sorry. Sorry, Matt.
No, there we go. That was a little insight there into the editorial process. That's great for our listeners. That's exactly what we're here for.
Oh god.
And look, I'm not gonna put you guys through too much more of this, but I've got to ask. There are so many different areas that you could be in as filmmakers, but you have chosen to live in this sleep-deprived, mud-covered, snow-frozen world that you always seem to be charging about in with your cameras. Which way round was it for you? Are you filmmakers that were bewitched by being in the outdoors, or were you outdoorsy people that thought, I should film this? What is it that drives you to keep creating this kind of content?
I think we definitely came from an outdoorsy background and then sort of went into filmmaking. But I think the reason that we continue to do it is it presents in the same way that the reason that athletes like John and Damian and many others love pushing their boundaries. They love being tested, and the feeling of being out there and having to perform. Basically, that's a similar kind of feeling that I certainly get when we're out there, whether it's on an event, whether it's on an FKT, or to be quite honest, even if it's on a normal a normal shoot without the constraints of a race. It's that feeling of, right, okay, there's this time between here and here, you've got to do your best between that, and the creativity element as well. Sometimes my brain gets stuck when I think about we're making whenever you create something, you're making something that's never been seen or heard before, ever. Never. It's in the universe. It's literally never existed. It's probably spent too much time thinking about stuff, really. But
no, you know what? I think that's absolutely true. I was in bands and in music before, like in an earlier life, and now I'm very much in. I wouldn't describe myself as a videographer in the same way that you were, but I'm out there doing my photography and writing and creating stuff around this wonderful scene that we seem to have got involved in, and I think you're absolutely right. It's the simple joy of creating something absolutely new out of nothing. It keeps me, whatever area I'm in, that keeps me creating something. So no, you can have that. I like that. I might even cut that out as an excerpt when we're advertising this podcast.
There was just just reminded me of something that we heard in we went to a talk once given by, was it Seb Montaz? And he said that photographers, filmmakers, musicians and the creative industry, they're the jesters of the modern world. And I really like that, because it's a reminder to almost not take yourself too seriously, but also to, get out there and have fun, entertain people, tell stories. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. And there you go. That's the other advertising excerpt sorted. You two are very poignant today. You were worried about this. You're on form. All right, then. Anyone who's listening to this and wants to go out and watch Totally FKT, it's not called Totally FKT, is it? Let's be honest. We talked about that a bit when I was interviewing Damo earlier, about how I was refusing to pronounce it the way that it looks because I didn't want to have to censor this episode. But you have called the film Totally Fucked.
Yes. Yeah. It was a happy coincidence.
Which I think it's not just a pun for pun's sake. I think once people see it, they'll see
Totally Fucked.
yeah, they'll see that.
Yeah. I think it's brilliant. I absolutely do. It is a film about two absolutely colossal FKTs, and there is no way that either of them got through that experience without being fucked at some point. So there you go. This episode is censored now, but I think it's absolutely worth it. Where can this obscenely titled film be seen?
So we're very lucky to have it premiering at Kendal Mountain Festival on the 22nd of November. I think it's at 4:30.
Yeah.
And it's an online festival for the whole festival this year, which is sad because we won't be able to see like all the friends and people in the industry that we normally bump into. But the good side is it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you can watch it, be a part of it, and experience a bit of Kendal fun times. And after the screening of the film, Damian and John will be doing a Q&A with Hugh, and we'll be there as well to make sure they tell the truth.
Well, in that case, you guys better make sure you send me over a couple of links that I can put in the description under here so people can be there virtually for Kendal and watch this amazing film. But thanks very much for talking to us today. It's appreciated. And if you guys are up for it, I really think we should do a full episode at some point. You guys have seen behind the scenes of some amazing records and races around the world, and I'm determined to tap into that.
Oh, well, thank you very much for having us, Will.
Yeah, and we'd definitely like to... Well, as long as people are willing to listen, well, we're happy to talk.
Well, look, I'll record it and I'll distribute it. It's kind of up to them if they want to listen to it or not. And I think they will. All right, you have a good day, guys.
You too.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.